This podcast is brought to you by the American Enterprise Institute.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, review, and share.
Thanks for listening. Here's our show.
What the hell is going on?
What's really going on?
We said, what the hell happened? You don't have to know what the hell is on it.
They see what's going on.
I don't know what's going on. What is going on? We must find out what is going on.
Hi, I'm Danielle Pletka.
And I'm Mark Thiessen.
Welcome to our podcast, What the Hell is Going On? Stock market version.
Yes, indeed. If you look at it through the prism of the stock market, think what the hell is going on is a really apropos question right now, Danny.
Oh my God.
So I am super positive about most of what Donald Trump has done and is now approaching first 100 days in office. I love what he's doing on the border. I love what he's doing vis-a-vis Iran. I love the strikes against the Houthis. I think I'm hopefully cautiously optimistic on Ukraine. There's a lot going on. I love the plans for a big, beautiful bill to reform the tax code. And I'm not so sure about the tariffs. And I worry that the tariffs put all of the rest of that at risk. But I've got a hopeful, optimistic take on that as well. But I want to hear what you think, Danny.
Yeah. So let me tell you a little story. When the president announced the tariffs last week, everybody's seen, the stories, they imposed tariff on islands where there are no people and only penguins, on countries that don't trade with us, like Lesotho. But
there was a great meme on that, by the way, of like the penguins instructing the seagulls on how to bomb America. With a map and everything.
Yes, I have to say that I have found that Washington has become, once again, an object of humor, which I welcome, because for many years, there was no humor. Like, since the Clinton administration, we weren't allowed to joke about anything. It was like Obama was such a serious, dour person, and then Trump was funny, but then poor Biden, you couldn't really do that. And now, oh my God, the penguin memes, the seagull memes, the puppets. There are a couple of puppet shows that are even more hilarious. Conversations between Trump and Putin that I sent you over Instagram, by the way. But back to my story. So anyway, they imposed, I think, 17% tariffs on the state of Israel. Israel had very ostentatiously, prior to this announcement, removed any remaining tariffs on American goods in order to kind of escape. And they didn't escape. Now, for a country like Israel of 10 million people, these things make a difference. They're not the worst tariffs out there. They're not China, but still. And so off hops Benjamin Netanyahu to see his good friend, his close personal friend, the guy who he really vibes with, Donald Trump, in order to deal with the problem. What happens? Trump basically...
Not just that.
Oh, well, no. This is the story I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Bibi didn't know about the meeting that was taking place this coming Saturday between the United States, between that rocket scientist, Steve Witkoff, and the Iranians. He didn't know. He found out at that meeting. In other words, I'm not sure I agree with you about tariffs, and I'm not sure I agree with you about our policy on Iran. And Bibi had a complete failed meeting. Also, who does that? That was what the Obama administration did to the Israelis. We're not telling them that we're about to meet directly with the Iranians? What the hell?
Well, I think that's lack of smooth execution, but not lack of a good policy. But this is not an Iran podcast.
I know.
We can talk about that at another time. I think giving the Iranians an ultimatum, you got 2 months to make a deal or we're going to take out your nuclear program, is pretty good policy. But we can debate that another time. So here's the thing about the tariffs and why I'm not sure how I feel about them. There are two Donald Trumps. Right? There's Donald Trump, who thinks that tariff is the most beautiful word in the English language after love and religion, right? And and tariffs are going to bring in tons and tons of revenue. And then there's Donald Trump, the deal maker, who is really, really good at using leverage and using the theory of escalation dominance to get deals, both with friends and allies, right? And so the word is that there are about 70 countries that have reached out to the United States and asked to negotiate with us. Trump has as of today, paused the tariffs for 90 days to allow those negotiations to go forward. And If he negotiates and gets to reduction of tariffs on the United States, then this may end up being something very good. If he doesn't cut deals and wants to bring in revenue through the tariffs, it could be something absolutely terrible. And so we don't know which one it is yet. The Trump administration has said that the U.S. multinationals, U.S. companies, pay other countries $370 billion a year in tariffs and non-tariff barriers and taxes, and we take in $57 billion. If those numbers may not be exactly right, but there's a huge disparity. And so there's two ways to deal with that. You can raise our tariffs by $370 billion and say, ha, and we're going to bring in revenue and shut down global trade and protect U.S. industries. Or you can raise our tariffs to $370 billion and say, let's bring them down to zero together. And so I don't know which Trump it's going to be. Is it Trump the tariff lover or Trump the deal maker? If it's Trump the deal maker, this could end up being the greatest free trade move any president has ever made. If he can manage to bring down tariffs and non-tariff barriers on U.S. exports all over the world for countries that wouldn't be negotiating with us if it wasn't for this, then it might end up being a good thing despite the temporary hit to our 401ks. If not, it could be a very bad thing. And we just don't know which it is yet.
Look, I see your argument. I think that, the most reasonable argument for what Trump has done is what you just said. But I also look at the voodoo science and voodoo economics behind how they calculated this, and it doesn't make me very sanguine about the idiots who are running our economy at either the Commerce Department or inside the White House. Now, of course, you and I know a couple of those people, so I can attest to that. But I think the problem here is that this administration spends very, very little time thinking about second-order effects or third-order effects, and that really is a worrisome characteristic. Now, I will say, I think that was true of previous administrations too. This is not a whataboutism argument, as much as I hate that expression. It is that the disruption is truly devastating to the economy and may well put us into a recession. And if, in fact, it ends up sorting itself out, there will still be a question about how he did this. And again, it's always the same problem, right? It's the how. It's not the what, it's the how.
Well, I don't know. If this ends up being 70 trade deals that lower barriers, then how he did it is he would have never gotten those deals without this. And the problem also is, Danny, is that there's an intellectual incoherence in part because his team is divided. You've got Besant, who wants to cut deals, and you've got Navarro, who thinks the tariffs are awesome, and they're both speaking for the administration. You've got Elon Musk, who's saying we need to get to zero tariffs with Europe, and you've got Navarro calling him a car dealer who wants to get cheap parts, and Musk turning back and saying, what the hell has Peter Navarro ever built? And so you've got this whole spat going on. His team isn't united on what the strategy is. And the only way we're going to ever find out what the strategy was when Donald Trump executes what he's doing with the leverage he's built himself. Is he going to use the leverage, or is he going to try and use this to keep the tariffs in place and bring in trillions and trillions of dollars in revenue so we can get rid of the IRS and have an external revenue service, as he has joked? And we
I don't
just
think he's
don't know
joking.
the answer. But you've got a piece that you've written on our Substack, and we don't have a guest today. What we're doing is one of our What the Hell Extras, where we share with you one of our pieces, then we're going to talk about it. So why don't we have you lay out your piece? Your piece is called What the Hell, the Tariff Tsunami. You can find it on our Substack, which we'll link to here. But Danny, why don't you share your piece with us, and then we can talk about it.
Okay, with pleasure.
Your
Second,
piece, which is yours.
my piece, my theory, which is mine. Which
Yes.
echoes a lot of what you said, but I think that the secondary question is obviously whether he has a strategy. But let me read my piece, which is
All
mine.
right.
Here we go. My piece. Here's my piece. Better economists than I, not an economist at all, will explain the corrosive and destabilizing effects of Donald Trump's strange new tariff regime. No one should be surprised by the aggressive nature of the Trump tariff wars. 34% on China. That's now, by the way, much higher. He advertised that clearly from the get-go. The question is, what is in Donald Trump's mind? He's upending the global trading system, sliming the U.S. economy, killing our 401ks, and trashing the dollar. So what does he think he's getting? Bullet number one, leverage. Trump may not have been a serious or a successful businessman, though he was a very serious and successful marketer, but he has a theory of the game. He who has the most leverage wins. One might believe that being the world's largest and most prosperous economy is leverage in and of itself, but in Trump's worldview, more is always better. How does one amass additional leverage? By threatening to punish everyone and then selectively negotiating away, quote, cards, unquote, for concessions from the other side. Think of it like a kidnapping or ransomware. Trump takes your exports hostage and releases them slowly in exchange for what he perceives are necessary payouts to even the playing field. Second bullet, America first. Making it in America is always better in the Trump Weltanschauung. That just shows how sophisticated I am using a German word. It means worldview. And if you are economically illiterate, that sounds about right. Why buy those stinking Chinese TVs when you can buy them made by honest, patriotic Americans? This means jobs and manufacturing at home, reshoring if you're fancy, and it means rebuilding an American factory machine that restores the older glory days when we did make TVs and such. Third bullet, fairness. Damn those foreigners. They have value-added taxes, which Trump officials have described as a tariff. They're selling more to us than they're buying. They're doing business with each other and excluding the United States. In a fair world, we would buy and sell the same amount and never have trade deficits, or better still, everyone would have a trade deficit with us, because deficits are bad and unfair. There are other Trump-perceived benefits to the tariff wars, but most fall under the three categories above. The problem, unfortunately, is that Trump is wrong about how global trade works. This is not a lefty hater shot at Donald Trump, Republican. Sadly, this is just fact. Take the leverage argument. First, no one likes a kidnapper, or the moral equivalent who embraces the same tactics. Second, it doesn't really work. Trump may be able to scrape some concessions from America's trading partners, but at the end of the day, they will make less expensive arrangements with countries that see a terrific opportunity to exclude the United States from global trading markets. Who might that be? China. Duh. There should be no doubt that free trading arrangements have consequences, and that there are people who are left behind by them. This was Trump's anti-NAFTA argument, and in political terms, he won that fight. The Democrats don't support free trade anymore either. However, the numbers behind tariff or tax or whatever free trading arrangements are hard to dismiss. Fewer barriers to entry mean ease of doing business, which means sales, which mean jobs. Some do lose their jobs when the cheaper labor in manufacturing is overseas, but adaptation is the unfortunate and little-liked answer. We can deny that all we like, but the bottom line is that other nations don't agree, and they will ink such agreements with each other to our exclusion. That is not called winning. The America First argument is another feature that sounds better than it is in execution when it comes to economics. Sure, I'd rather buy an iPhone made in America. I'd also rather pay 10x less. That's the dilemma we face. And unfortunately, while we may be able to muscle some iPhones and BMWs and Mercedes and chip manufacturing into the United States, companies can't afford to ignore labor costs, and we are at the pricey end of the scale. Nor is there much evidence to suggest that more expensively made things here actually return jobs to Uncle Sam. Rather, the evidence is that the suddenly exorbitant cost of imports, because precursors in the supply chain will still be made overseas, will drive up inflation, which demands higher salaries, which lowers initial hiring. And even though happy Trump-voting Joe Sixpack is now making your TV or car or stove or air conditioner, everything he buys at the supermarket will still be astronomically more pricey because tariffs. Voters hate inflation. Ask Joe Biden. The fairness argument is just, let's not sugarcoat this, dumb. We buy more because we're rich, and we like cheaper stuff. Other countries sell more than they buy from us because we don't sell what they're buying. And when we do, it's more expensive. Indeed, let's go further and say the entire notion of measuring trade deficits is dumb. We maximize what we can sell, and we buy the cheapest stuff that we want. Ideally, we do so in a free trade environment in which goods cost the same to us that they do to the guy in the foreign country. When they don't, that's when we have a legitimate argument. Otherwise, no. And a small note on VATs, that's value-added taxes. I spend a lot of time overseas. I hate the VAT, and in a lot of countries it drives the economy underground. Why not pay in cash if you can avoid a 20% surcharge? But a VAT is fundamentally a sales tax. Pringles made in America come with the same VAT as chips made in Italy if you're buying them in an Italian supermarket. Everyone pays the VAT, period. If it were only imposed on U.S. goods, it could be called a tariff. But that's not true anywhere. A final point. Donald Trump likes to be unpredictable. He wants friend and adversary alike to be on tenterhooks about what he might do at any moment. On the economic side, this unpredictability suppresses investment, incentivizes alternative arrangements that are more predictable, and drives up costs. Why hire if you think the policy may change next week or next year? Increasingly, businesses are simply going to wait out Donald Trump. In foreign policy, which I know better, there's a thing called a declaratory policy. I love declaratory policies because they lay out both costs and benefits to our friends and our enemies. Think of it this way. Quote, NATO allies, if you spend more on your defense, we will remain committed to our alliance. If you don't, we won't. Unquote. Or better still, quote, Iran, if you develop a nuclear weapon, we will attack you and depose you from power. Unquote. Based on statements of policy like this, countries can make assumptions about whether or not to move forward, adjust their own policies into sync with Washington, or bear the risks. You may counter-argue that all Trump is doing is declaring his policy and allowing countries to adjust. Unfortunately, what he's actually doing is bombing Iran and then asking Iran to come to the negotiating table. It might work, but odds are it won't, because you don't start by bombing. I don't believe Donald Trump is persuadable on the economic front because his cockamamie view of how world trade works is akin to a religious belief, and the acolytes who surround him are more interested in their own influence than they are in correcting his many misconceptions. That's a shame because I like my 401k, and every American is going to pay a very steep price, the very steep price of the Trump team's economic fecklessness. Okay, now you can disagree, Mark.
I do disagree with a lot of it, and there's a lot to unpack. So let's start.
Unpack it.
So most Americans aren't buying Pringles, unlike you, in an Italian grocery store. They're buying Italian products here in the United States, and we're not paying a VAT. So the VAT is
You are paying a sales tax.
Well, but not like the VAT. It's different.
What your argument is that the VAT is too high.
Yeah. So yes, exactly. So it's a non-tariff barrier to U.S. selling products abroad, whereas here they don't pay the VAT. So it's a distinction. Put that aside for a second. The reality is that these countries have put a lot of barriers to U.S. exports. Trump points out that we don't sell, you don't see Chevy Suburbans in Italy when you're driving around, that they have barriers to selling U.S. products around the world. And you made the NATO analogy. The NATO analogy is actually a perfect analogy, but not the way you made it. Donald Trump, everyone said, oh my gosh, he's disrupting the entire, Atlantic alliance and the transatlantic security balance that we've had for 70 years and the Cold War and all the rest of it by saying that we won't defend countries that don't pay their 2%. Well, guess what? He got them to spend $400 billion more on defense by calling that into question. I'm not going to say declaratively that's what he's doing here, but he could be doing that here. He's calling into question the entire global trading.
Inshallah, that is what he's doing here.
He's calling into question the entire global trading system, and countries are coming to him and saying, we're willing to lower our barriers to U.S. products. We're willing to negotiate. We're willing to buy more American products. We're willing to cut deals. So if he cuts deals and gets them to do that, he's doing the exact same thing he did with NATO, which made NATO stronger. NATO is stronger today because of Donald Trump's threats to NATO than it was before he was president. Because I know this because I was in the Bush administration and I wrote speeches for Donald Rumsfeld and George W. Bush saying, please, oh pretty please, pay your 2%. And Obama's team did the same thing. And no one did it until Trump came in and brought down a hammer. So I don't think you can dismiss the possibility that this could turn out the same way.
You realize that the cost of this is that more than $10 trillion has been wiped off global markets, right?
Yeah, you know what? First of all, that is a big deal, and I acknowledge that. But if you suddenly get a bunch of deals, the markets will recover all that and more. It just depends on what he does, right?
But isn't that bad too, Mark? I mean, look, again, you mentioned this, and I think that was a really important point, is that there seems to be a war going on inside the administration about what it is the president really thinks, right? We've got Howard Lutnick and Peter Navarro, who are, I won't use an epithet, but against Scott Bessent, who's the Treasury Secretary, and other more sober voices here. And when I talk about a declaratory policy, we don't actually know what Trump is doing here.
We don't know the declaratory.
And isn't that bad?
Yes, because I don't. But here's the thing. So I was on Special Report the other night, and I said, so you have, let's accept the Trump figure that there are $370 billion in tariffs and non-tariff barriers, taxes that the U.S. companies pay. You can either raise ours to $370 billion and make it reciprocal, or you can lower both of them to zero, but you can't do both. It's one or the other, right? And I was actually wrong, because you kind of can do both, because you can say to Israel, we're going to lower to zero, right? But you could say to the European Union, not you, because we don't like you for other reasons. He could end up with some weird hybrid policy coming out of this, where certain countries that come to him and offer him the best deals get the best trade regime, and other countries who are not willing to negotiate or are too slow to come to the table or piss him off for some reason or other don't. And he collects tariff revenue from that. He could see these things as not being incompatible, which gives him leverage, because you want to be the country that's negotiating with him and getting the good deal and not the other. So I'm just saying that it's not as simple as the narrative of the last 2 weeks has been, which is like, oh my God, hair on fire. He set the world economy on fire. It's
$10 trillion
over.
is a lot of money. That's enough to make people set their hair on fire. We
So
did have a depression following policies like these, if you remember.
Well, first of all, the Smoot-Hawley tariffs were in place for a long, long time. If 3 months from now, we have deals upon deals and the market has recovered all of its lost ground. And oh, by the way, we've also got a big, beautiful bill passed with extending the Trump tax cuts and having all sorts of pro-growth policies. And he's eliminated taxes on tips so that the people who are paying more at Walmart are actually keeping more of their income. The whole picture could be different. It just depends on what he does. Does he listen to Navarro or does he listen to Bessent? Does he listen to Lutnick or does he listen to Musk? Or what is the mix of policy that comes out of? I don't know what it is. I'm not sitting here telling you it's going to be perfect. I'm not telling you that everything that everyone's saying is wrong. I'm just saying it could be wrong.
Okay,
And
Ben, would you please get that clip
possibility.
and make sure we keep it so that I can stuff it down Mark's throat?
There's nothing to stuff down my throat, because I just said it could go either way. So no
Right,
matter
but
what
you
happens,
said-
I'm covered.
There will be no stuffage.
And I'm going to write this in the Washington Post, Danny, so you can clip that in your scrapbook of all my great columns that you keep on your bookshelf, so that when you really don't know what to think, you can just go ahead and pull it out and read it and understand how the world works.
I do love your columns, and I know why Donald Trump loves you after this conversation. Milton Friedman is less affectionate. From the skies, he's looking down on you and thinking to himself, this guy is an ignoramus.
Oh,
but
so
what the hell?
That's the other thing I want to talk to you about. So you reminded me when you said Milton Friedman. So I'm in general agreement with Milton Friedman on free trade. I think as a pure economic matter, free trade is better because it creates wealth and it brings us cheaper goods. But as we learned during the pandemic, you don't put virologists in charge of the economy. And as foreign policy scholars, we don't necessarily put economists only in charge of the economy either, right? So we have national security implications. We had Mike Gallagher on this podcast who told us something that absolutely shocked me, which is that we are dependent on China for energetics, which is what we put in our missiles to make them fly at Beijing if there's a war, right? How the hell did we let that happen? How is it that we don't make any shipping cranes anymore and that we're dependent on the communist Chinese for the shipping cranes, and that they have radio transmitters on our shipping cranes, which they can shut them down from Beijing if they wanted to shut down our ports in a conflict? There are so many ways that we have, through China's admission into the WTO and this rush for globalization, put ourselves at national security risk. We don't make the precursors for our pharmaceuticals anymore, so we're dependent on them for antibiotics and other medicines. There's so many things that are not just trade issues, not just economic issues, that I want to reshore some of that, even if it costs more.
So I like that argument. And I think there is always a giant asterisk after this, which is I'm not worried about the fact that we're screwing the Chinese.
Amen.
Because of all of the arguments that you just made. I think there is a grain of truth to the economically illiterate arguments that are being made by the White House. There is no question. Let me give you a perfect example. In Europe, they don't import American chickens because we wash our chickens in bleach in order to rid them of, and of course, everybody who's bought a Purdue chicken knows you're not eating bleach, but they don't, right? So that is a non-tariff barrier. Our beef is often barred from a variety of countries, including one of the senators, I don't remember whom, argued from Australia, because we use hormones. Now, those hormones don't end up in cooked meat. These arguments are specious. And years ago, I actually finally cottoned on to how it was that inside the European Union, they were still using non-tariff barriers to the free movement, for example, of goods and people. What do? They have licensing requirements, right? So you're perfectly free if you're German to go and work in France, but you can't be a teacher because you have to go to a lycée and it has to be in French and you have to get a license and it has to be this and you have to have attended for 2 years, right? These are the
We
kinds
have that
of
here
things
too.
we do, but
a
these are
huge
the
problem.
kinds, right? Yes, absolutely. I mean, remember the licensing in California for hairdressers and cosmetologists, as if
Yeah.
somehow the regulatory bodies should.
We have socialists here too.
Yes, we do, and there are many in California and in Massachusetts and New York. There's no question about that. So, I mean, again, the premise is not crazy. Again, it's just the execution. And look, Mark, if Donald Trump ends up being a hostage taker who really just wants to end up with a better system, maybe I will eat some of my words, but I think this is a really ass backwards way to go about it. And I think the other problem is that, again, he could have had the same effect by just saying he was going to do this and then telling everybody to come and negotiate. And on the day before Liberation Day, quote unquote, my God, the irony. On the day before that, nobody had any idea what he was going to say. In fact, the absolutely back-asswards math that they used to calculate these tariffs, they figured out the day before. This is not a way to do business. Again, you ought to give them an opportunity to come. If they don't believe him, that's fine. I agree with you about reshoring a lot of the critical goods that we now get from China or China via India or China via Mexico. I agree about all of those things. China is a very separate case. I want to ask you a question. What do you think about the fact that he didn't impose any tariffs on Russia, but did on Ukraine?
Actually, so here's a story that just appeared. I think this is in Euromaidan Press in Ukraine. U.S. President Donald Trump's policies, once seen as a potential lifeline for his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin, are finally delivering a harsh and unintended punishment to Moscow. In a stunning irony, Trump's tariffs war and reckless trade policies have sent Russian stocks plummeting and oil prices crashing to their lowest level in 4 years, potentially sinking the Russian economy in the very way he sought to avoid. Brent crude is now just 63, while Urals, Russian's key export blend, plunged to almost 50 per barrel. That is far below what the Kremlin needs to even break even, delivering a severe blow to the already fragile economy. These policies are actually hurting Moscow. What he said was, when he was asked why he didn't impose them on Russia, is that we're trying to negotiate with Russia, and he may do that. He's said that he's willing to, if Putin doesn't come to the table, put secondary sanctions on Russian oil and do a maximum pressure campaign the way he did with Iran, where he brought Iran's oil to just I think 400,000 barrels a day, which is near zero in economic terms. We may be heading there. There's a separate track going on negotiations on Ukraine, and we could probably have another podcast to discuss how that's going. But Russia has not escaped scot-free on this.
I think you missed the key word in that little piece that you read, which I also saw, which is unintentional.
I didn't
miss it. What do you
miss
think
it.
of the fact that he imposed tariffs on Ukraine?
I don't
and
think he
not
should have
on
done that either.
Russia.
I disagree with that. With that.
But why do you think he did it?
I don't know how much of it is deliberate and how much is just, as you say, the execution, right? I just don't know the answer. I don't know.
But I mean, we hit the penguins. Why not the why not the commies?
Well, he explained why he didn't do it to Russia. I'm not sure why he did it to Ukraine as well. I guess he just treats Ukraine as a normal country and Russia as an exception.
Yes.
Until we get the deal. I think that generally one of the rules I have about understanding Donald Trump is that he tends to do what he says he's going to do, for better or for worse. I think he's probably one of the most consistent people when it comes to that.
So we bombed Hamas?
Sorry?
We bombed Hamas?
I don't know what that has to do with anything.
He said he was going to bomb Gaza if they didn't release our hostages.
He said all hell was going to break loose, and that could be Israel doing it. I don't know. We also don't know what's going to happen here with Iran and how he does all this. He's not bombing and then negotiating. He's negotiating and then promising to bomb. And so we'll see how that all plays out. But it's true that he does what he says he's going to do. Some of the things we like and some of the things we don't like, but he tends to do what he says. He has said that he's getting tired of Putin foot dragging, and that if he doesn't come to the table and negotiate peace and come to a ceasefire, he's going to impose sanctions and tariffs on Russian oil. He said that he will increase support for Ukraine. These are things that he said. I expect that at some point he will do them if the conditions have. And if he doesn't, I'll call him out. And I'll say
that
hey,
I know you will. I trust you to
but
call him out.
generally speaking, when everybody's freaking out about the tariffs right now, he said he was going to do this. He campaigned on it.
Yeah, but he didn't say what he was going to do, Mark. He said he was going to do this, and I said that in my piece.
Tariff is the most beautiful word in the English language, and we're going to impose tariffs on everybody. Give him credit for the fact that he tends to deliver on his promises.
He tends to do the stupid things he's promised.
And the good things. Every president in our lifetime said that they would move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, and only Trump did it because he said he was going to do it, and he did it. I can give you a whole litany of things that he said he was going to do that other presidents didn't do, and he did. I say it for better or for worse. There are some things that he promised to do and did, and I love, and there's some things he promised to do, and I wish he hadn't. Yeah. I wish he had broken his promise sometimes. But the credit, he does deserve credit that he tends to do what he says. And so in Ukraine, I'm counting on him to do what he said. And we'll see. And we
shall indeed see, and we shall indeed discuss it. Hey, I'd love to hear what people think. It's been really interesting to me to see that there really is divided opinion in the country about these tariffs and the rationale for them. So it'll really be interesting for me to see how this ultimately shakes out. You're right. You're right in the sense that it's early days. You're wrong in the sense that $10 trillion is still a ton of dough, and wiping that.
Well, it sucks if you need the money now.
Well, there are a lot of people who do.
I know there are a lot of people who do, but if you're long-term investing right now, that money could come back and then some if this all works out in the right way.
From your mouth to God's ears is all I can say, Mark.
I'm in the market too, baby.
Hey guys,
my money too. I'm counting on him doing the right thing because I got 4 kids going to college, and
Oh my God. Thank God that's almost done for me. But yes, oh my God. Anyway, everybody, let us know what you think. Don't forget to read the Substack yourself. We'll put a link in, and Mark's got a piece coming out on this in the Washington Post soon in his column that I keep by my bedside in order to read and reread them. Sometimes to help me sleep, but sometimes to learn something.
That was mean.
I didn't mean that.
You are mean.
I am mean. Anyway, take care, folks.
See you next week. Let us know what topics you'd like us to cover. You can get in touch with the show by emailing us at whatthehell@aei.org.
Or you can reach us on Twitter. I'm at @dpletka.
And I'm at Mark Thiessen. That's Mark with a C.
Please rate and review the podcast. If you like the show, please subscribe, share it, comment on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this.
Thanks for listening.